Today we're going to go over chapter 3.3 of Unit 3, and it's Empires, Belief Systems. Remember, our time period is 1450 to 1750. So this is the one we're going to go over today. Again, we're taking the notes through the OneNote, so just fill in the blanks as I go through the PowerPoint. And this is the last chapter of Unit 3. So this was a really short unit. Okay, we'll cut that out. Just a quick mention, this is the last chapter of Unit 3. Yes, it was a really short unit, so let's just get started. So our learning objective for this chapter is explain how different belief systems endured or changed during the period from 1450 to 1750. Now, which of our spice tea themes will we focus on in this chapter? If you remember, spice tea is social, political, interactions with the environment, cultural, economic, and technological. So let's see which one we're focusing on. We're going to focus on cultural. So you should fill in that cultural blank on your OneNote. And the reason we can tell it's cultural is because it mentions belief systems. And belief systems usually means religion. So just to reiterate, when you see belief system on any question, it usually means religion. And religion is always cultural. So religion is always going to be part of that spice, that C in spice tea. So as we can see from this map right here, we're going to take a look at different belief systems from around the world. So let's see a few that are featured on the map. We've got Islam right here with our Islamic gunpowder empires. We've got Buddhism right here in the east. We've got Christianity up here, but as we can see, Christianity is going to be divided into different sects. We've got Shintoism right here in Japan, which can coincide with Buddhism. And then once the European powers get a hold of the New World, they're going to spread all of that Catholicism up there. So we're not really focusing on Southern Africa. We're mostly going to look at this part of the world. We're not really going to look at the Americas right now either. So just a quick mention, in this chapter, we're also going to see how religion had the power to unify, but also divide people. And we'll see how that plays out. So probably the biggest and probably most lasting religious change that we see happening during this time period is the Protestant Reformation, and we've got a definition for that. So the Protestant Reformation is going to challenge the Catholic Church, and it's also going to cause a split in Christianity. So first, to understand the Reformation, we got to have a little bit of background. So let me give you some contextualization. So the Catholic Church, which was the main unifying force in Europe, was getting to be a little dirty, a little corrupt. So when I say church, I mean the Catholic Church. So there were priests, there were bishops, there were popes, basically church officials, and they were always taking like church money and using it to spend lavishly on themselves. So the church is going to try to reform itself, but they're going to be very unsuccessful. They're not going to try hard enough, so they're not going to be very successful. One example of not being successful at reforming or improving is not allowing the Bible to be translated into English or any language that's not Latin. So, why would they not allow this? Well, because only priests and church officials could read Latin. So, if regular people could read the Bible because it was, let's say, in English, there wouldn't really be a need for priests or church officials. So, by keeping the Bible very exclusive. It allowed the Catholic Church to have more influence on people's lives. So this, along with centralizing rulers, wanting to get a hold of some very wealthy Catholic monasteries that were on some good land, and they wanted to also establish their own churches. These became reasons why the Catholic Church started to lose power. Also, there were lots of people that lost their faith during the Black Death because they saw that the church was unable to stop it. So all of this is going to culminate in the church being, its power being waned down and it being very corrupt. And it's going to culminate in the start of the Protestant Reformation. Now, let's get into the actual Reformation. How did it start? What happened? So it's all going to start with a monk from Wittenberg, which is in Germany, and his name is Martin Luther. So if you know Martin Luther King, that's who he was named after. He was named after this guy, Martin Luther. So Martin Luther is going to see lots of corruption in the Catholic Church. So first, he's going to see the sale of indulgences as unholy. So indulgences basically was a way for people to pay the church to have them be forgiven from committing sin or receiving punishment. So if you had enough money, you could pay to, not go to hell or not have to repent for a sin you committed. So Martin Luther saw that and he pointed that out as very unfair and very shady. And he also did not like simony, and simony is just the selling of church offices. So essentially, if you paid the right price, you could buy yourself a cushy little place in the church, maybe become a bishop or a cardinal. And remember, being a church official came with lots of power and perks. So Luther also saw this as being very corrupt. So he saw all of these very unfair, very shady things that the church was doing, and he wrote them all down and created his 95 Theses. So the 95 Theses is basically all of the complaints that Luther had against the Catholic Church. He ended up nailing his 95 Theses, so this is like a reproduction of that, to the church door of a church in Wittenberg and prepared for people to debate him on his ideas. He wasn't looking to start a whole movement, he was just kind of looking for some academic discourse. The church, however, freaked out when they heard of this, so their reaction was pretty predictable. Luther was excommunicated. This means he was kicked out of the Catholic Church. And you guys might see this as like not a big deal, but back when the church was very um, involved in your daily life and your social life, it was a very big deal. And remember, Luther was a monk, so he lived in a Catholic monastery. So he was homeless. He was kicked out of his home. He couldn't go to any family members or any people who took him in, could be at risk of being excommunicated as well. So this was a very bad thing. So this is Martin Luther. This is the Pope excommunicating him. So he's like, saying you're very corrupt, and he's like, well, I'm gonna excommunicate you. But if it wasn't for lots of German princesses actually siding with Luther, he would have probably died homeless. So lucky for him, he had a lot of wealthy sponsors. And these German princes actually sided with Luther because they didn't really care about him calling out the church, but they saw an opportunity to get those wealthy lands that Catholic monasteries owned on their land. They're like, well, now we have a good excuse to confiscate those lands and take them as our own. We could say that we're siding with Luther and going along with his Protestant Reformation, and get access to those lands. So it was really all about power and influence and money with these German princes. Luther's so as a result of the Protestantism, which is what Luther kickstarted it, and Lutheranism, which is the other sect of Christianity that he created. All of these sects took off and basically became new sects of Christianity. So Luther's efforts also created a split, but one of the things he preached is he believed that anyone could interpret the Bible and talk directly to God, and anyone means anyone, even women. So his efforts also promoted women's literacy because it encouraged them to learn to read so that they could understand the Bible. So that's a good thing that he did. Following Luther's footsteps, we have another guy, John Calvin. Calvin started another sect of Christianity called Calvinism. So, Calvinism basically believed that only the elect, those predestined or chosen by God, were destined to go to heaven. So, Calvinists, just a quick mention Calvinists is John Calvin. Calvinists in France were called Huguenots, and then we also have Calvinists in England that were called Puritans. They later went to the New World and established a colony in Boston. So, if you've ever read like the Scarlet Letter or learned about the Salem witch trials, these were the people that did that, the Puritans. So, just a quick mention of that. Now, we can't talk about the Protestant Reformation without mentioning Henry VIII. So let's talk about him. Henry VIII was the King of England from 1509 to 1547. And the thing about him is that he was married to his wife, Catherine of Aragon. And this is not her. We'll find out who she is. He actually wanted to get a divorce from his wife, Catherine, because she kept giving birth to girls, and he's a king of England. He can't have a girl be the heir to the throne. Like, that's weird. That's not normal. This is the 1500s. This is not 2020. So, he wanted to get a divorce and marry this woman instead, Anne Boleyn. He had already had his eyes on her. So that he could have her pop out some boys. However, getting a divorce is considered a sin in the Catholic Church. The only way that you could theoretically break up your marriage is if you get an annulment, and the only person that could give that to you was the Pope. So Henry went to the Pope to get an annulment for his marriage to Catherine, but the Pope did not want to give it to him because he did not want to risk pissing off Charles V, who was Catherine's cousin. And Charles V was the Holy Roman Emperor at this time. You might know him by his name on his chocolate bar, Carlos V. So that was him. So Henry did the reasonable thing and just cut ties off with the Pope and established his own church instead. So Henry established the Anglican Church, and this is going to be the Church of England. It's not going to answer to the Pope. And the King of England, which is Henry VIII, is going to become the new head of the church. So that's the other thing that happened during this time period. Fun fact, Anne Boleyn did not end up having any boys, so Henry kept divorcing his wives and marrying again until he had a male heir. So that's a stand-up guy that we have right there. But the Anglican Church is still present in England. The Queen Elizabeth II, is the head of the Anglican Church right now. So now let's move on to Russia. We're going to go back to Peter the Great. So in Russia, the Orthodox Church was a unifying force, kind of like how the Catholic Church was a unifying force in Europe during the Middle Ages. But Peter, remember our friend Peter? He's great. He went ahead and abolished the position of the patriarch and then replaced it with the Holy Synod. So the Holy Synod, they're only going to answer to the Tsar. And this way, Peter is going to establish himself as the head of the Orthodox Church. So this was a way of centralizing his power. So this way he um, has religious power, but also uh, political power in Russia. So not everyone was happy about this, and lots of old believers, these are very conservative Orthodox Christians, actually opposed Peter's reforms. So this is the symbol of the Orthodox Church. It looks just like our cross, except it has one and two more little lines across it. Okay, one more thing about Peter. He's also going to raise the minimum age for men to become eligible to be monks to 50, just so that he could have lots of young men serve in the army. So now, in response to all of this Protestantism, we have the Catholic Church have its own Reformation, which is commonly known as the Counter-Reformation or the Catholic Reformation. We're going to call it the Counter-Reformation. So it kind of occurred in 3 phases. So the first phase is going to be the Inquisition, which literally means like to inquire, to ask a question. But in this context of the Counter Reformation, the Inquisition's purpose was to root out and punish non believers or non Catholics. So the way they would do this is they would go around and ask you if you were a devout Catholic, if you were a true Catholic or not. And if you said no, they would go ahead and punish you by throwing you in jail or kicking you out of the country. But if you said yes and they didn't believe you, then they would go ahead and torture you until you admitted that you were a non believer. So they used a lot of brutal tactics. I'll show you a picture of that in a bit. And this happened all over the place where Catholicism was very strong. So places like Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. Then we had the Catholic Church create Jesuits. So this is basically the Society of Jesus. It's a religious order. And they're going to be created to help spread Catholicism and get rid of Protestantism. So they're going to do lots of missionary work in places like the Americas, in Japan, in India. They're also going to establish lots of schools and colleges all over the world, and they're still active today. There are still Jesuits today. And if you ever see a college named like Loyola College, there's a lot around the country. That's the Jesuits. Final thing, part of the Counter Reformation is the Council of Trent. And this is going to correct some of the church's worst abuses. They're going to go ahead and concentrate on reaffirming rituals like marriage and other sacraments, like improving the education of priests. The church is also going to publish the Index of Prohibited Books right here. And this was basically a book, a list of writings that the church banned, and this included lots of Protestant copies of the Bible and the writings of Copernicus, who was a scientist. So this is as you can see, Loyola is very present in the United States. So this is Loyola in New Orleans. This is Loyola University in Chicago. And then we have a bunch of Catholics torturing some Protestants during the Inquisition. So we've got right here, looks like they're pulling out his teeth. Right here, looks like they're hanging him. Right here, it looks like they might be burning his feet, maybe. So this is some of the torture techniques they would use. So was the Counter-Reformation successful? In a way it was, because it allowed Catholicism to stay very present and spread throughout the world. So it's going to remain a powerful source in Western Europe, around the Mediterranean Sea, and as part of the Spanish, Portuguese, and French colonies. We're going to mention Philip II because he is Charles V's son. He's going to rule the Netherlands and have them be Catholic from 1556 to 1501. And he's also going to try to conquer and reconvert England. Remember, England isn't Catholic anymore. He's going to try to do that in 1588 with his Spanish Armada. But the Spanish Armada is beaten by the English because they have just superior naval power, and the English are going to be led by none other than a woman, Elizabeth I, who, by the way, is Anne Boleyn's daughter. So after King Henry VIII dies, he doesn't leave any male heirs that are suitable to take the throne. So first, his crazy daughter Mary is going to take the throne, but then Elizabeth I, who is better liked leader, she's also going to take the throne, and she's going to rule for the longer. So that's her. So this is just to show you how Catholicism still thrives today. These are the top 25 nations where Catholics live. We've got Canada, we've got the US, Mexico, Brazil, a lot of South American countries, because they were Spanish and Portuguese colonies, are going to have lots of Catholics. The Philippines was a Spanish colony. It's going to have lots of Catholics. These, like Angola, was a Portuguese colony, so it's going to have lots of Catholics. We've got Poland, Spain, Portugal, Italy, France. They are predominantly Catholic, so they're going to have lots of Catholics. So this just shows you how strong Catholicism is even today. All right, so moving on to wars of religion. First, we've got in 1555, the Peace of Augsburg is established, and this is going to allow each German state to choose whether its ruler would be Catholic or Lutheran. So this is going to give them a choice whether they want to stay Catholic or they want to go in that Protestant route. So this is going to create even more of a shift between Catholicism and Protestantism. So you're going to see that divide. In France, we're going to have the Edict of Nantes, and this is going to allow Huguenots, if you remember, those were the Calvinists, to practice their faith. So this was a form of religious tolerance. When Louis XIV takes power, he's going to go ahead and revoke that Edict of Nantes, and this is going to have social and economic effects like, like having many skilled craftsmen that were Huguenots leave France, and with that, they're going to go ahead and take their knowledge of important industry techniques and styles with them. So, the fact that France was not being very tolerant of the Calvinists is going to cause them to leave, and that's going to have these effects on France. More wars of religion. We've got the 30 Years' War. And this was a religious conflict in the Holy Roman Empire, but it's going to show the conflict between Catholics and Protestants. So this is going to result in lots of widespread famine, starvation, and disease. And we don't need to know all of the details, but we do need to know the effects. So the Peace of Westphalia was the main effect of the 30 Years' War, and this is going to allow each area of the Holy Roman Empire to choose whether they wanted to be Roman Catholic, Lutheran, or Calvinist. So this is going to create even more of a divide between Catholicism and Protestantism. So because of this, we're going to have France, Spain, Italy. They're going to be Catholic mostly. Northern Europe is going to choose to be Lutheran or Calvinist. And then England is going to stay Protestant with their Anglican Church. So as a result of this, we're going to have that decentralization of power in the Holy Roman Empire. Because before this, a lot of the power came from the power of the Catholic Church, but now that the Catholic Church's power is kind of dimming down and waning, um, this is going to create decentralization, which is going to lead to different German states like Prussia have more power, and then they're eventually going to come together and create Germany, and we're going to have the unification of Germany later on. That's later, but it's very important to see how this is going to start out here, and then it's going to culminate into um, later on, we're going to see the unification of Germany. So this is just a handy dandy map of where all of the religions are. As you can see, Catholicism right here near the Mediterranean. Of course, we've got all of these Orthodox Christians right here next to Russia. We've got Lutheranism and Calvinism north, and then Anglican right here. And then we've got some Protestants right here. So now moving on to Islamic religious schisms. So in the Ottoman Empire before 1453, when the Byzantine Empire was in charge of Constantinople, we had mostly Orthodox Christianity be the dominant religion of the region. But after 1453, when the Ottomans take over, they're going to go ahead and make that region mostly Islam. So the Ottomans are going to go ahead and establish Sharia. Sharia just means a strict Islamic legal system that's going to deal with all aspects of life. So it's going to deal with things like criminal justice, marital laws, and issues of inheritance. So when you hear the term Sharia law, Sharia just means law in Arabic, I believe. And so Sharia just means Islamic law. The Safavids, like we said in our previous two chapters, the Safavids are going to keep using Shia as a unifying force. Remember, that was Shah Ismail's power base. He's going to use that to support his rule, and he's going to deny legitimacy to any Sunni. So that's going to keep creating that tension between these two. Safavids are Shia, Ottomans are Sunni Islam. Going to the Mughals, remember, they were Muslim, the Mughals, but Akbar, our most famous ruler of the Mughal Empire, he's going to go ahead and tolerate all religions. And we are going to see a new religion pop up called Sikhism, and Sikhism is a monotheistic religion, so it acknowledges one God, but it is believed to develop from Hinduism and have some influences from Sufism. So Akbar is going to go ahead and give Hindus positions in the government, and he's going to go ahead and marry Hindu wives. So even though he's a Muslim, he's going to give lots of importance to Hindus in his empire. He's going to also exempt Hindus from paying that non-Muslim tax that he has, like all the Christians and all the Jews and all the Buddhists pay. So why would Akbar do this? Because 70%, I believe it's 70% of the population in India, in the Mughal Empire, is Hindu. And he can't just go ahead and convert all of them to be Muslim. So he has to keep himself on their good side. He doesn't want them to turn against him. So that's why he practiced this very religious tolerant position. Last thing we got to mention is the scientific revolution. This is not necessarily a religion, but this is like kind of the only place that it could fit in this unit. So scientific revolution is going to result in scientific thinking gaining lots of popularity as trends in Renaissance ideas are going to spread. Remember, the Renaissance developed as this explosion of new ideas in Italy. So scientific thought is going to be based on reason rather than on just blind faith like religion was. And we're going to have empiricism become a thing, and Francis Bacon is going to come up with this, and this is like the early um, version of the scientific method that's going to insist on you got to collect data to back up a hypothesis. You can't just say, I think the sky is green. You got to collect data to say that, to prove that the sky is green. So we're going to have people like Isaac Newton publish their works on gravitational force. That's this guy right here, Isaac Newton. And lots of people are going to go ahead and think that these scientific ideas of rationality and reason could be applied to governments and society, which is eventually going to lead into the Enlightenment, which is our uh, what is it, turning point event around the 1700s. That's going to mark the start of the next time period. So just to give you guys a heads up on that. So for your next class, you are going to have a quiz on Unit 3, and it's going to be on AP Classroom, so just be ready for that. And that's it for the lecture. Make sure you have all of your notes. If you need to go back and look at it, that's fine. Just rewind the video and then pause when you need to pause. So that's it for today.